Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 625. And today's date is March 25th, 2015. And the title of this episode is U.S. Government Loses Control of the Middle Eastern Countries. They are now ready to push the authorization for war. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand all these private Western central bank countries like to convince us that we are in this fabulous recovery. And we know we're really not. I mean, we really can feel that there's just something that is off. But they like to throw out statistical numbers. They like to convince us and continually repeat that we are in a recovery. Don't worry about anything. We're taking care of it. Even the Eurozone now. Now, we know most of the countries there are hurting. We know they have a huge amount of debt. Unemployment is skyrocketing. And it doesn't look like it's getting better anytime soon. But the Eurozone is out there saying that we are in a recovery, we are creating money, and it is just revitalizing everything here in the Eurozone. But the improvement in the Eurozone, their economic situation, it really has been stolen from the rest of the world. Here are 3 ways in which the Eurozone was stealing growth from other economies. The depreciation of the euro. It has boosted already strong Eurozone exports and inflated the Eurozone trade surplus further, but at the expense of the Eurozone's competitors, including the US, emerging countries, and others. Germany's trade surplus with the rest of the world adds to growth in Germany and therefore the Eurozone. But this surplus has obviously been obtained at the expense of Germany's non-European trading partners. And we can see from these different areas the depreciation of the euro, the plunge in the price of oil, and the trade surpluses are responsible for the Eurozone recovery. But when we really look at the Eurozone, nothing has been happening inside the Eurozone that favors growth. There is no growth. It's the same thing that's happening here in the United States and in many different countries. They're just swapping out different things, changing statistical numbers, creating money where they can. Of course, the Eurozone, the United States can. Borrowing money, saying everything looks fine, but there is no growth whatsoever. And we can see in Canada, in Australia, in the United States, growth is starting to falter. It's starting to slow, decline. In Canada right now, we see the housing market might have hit the top. The bubble is at its fullest, and we see that things are starting to come apart. If we look in Calgary, we see single-family homes. Their sales have fallen by 34% last month. The new housing price index fell 0.1% in January. This was the first decrease at the national level in nearly a decade. The abrupt shift in housing demand and supply conditions in some parts of the country indicate that potentially severe housing corrections have already begun. Indirectly, the effect will spread to employment, the housing sector, consumer spending, and possibly the public sector spending. And we see that, yes, it is starting to spread. I mean, look at Target. They closed all of their stores and laid off 17,000 people. It is starting to spread throughout each one of these countries. We saw this back in 2007 going into 2008, where we see the economies are starting to fall apart. Here in the United States, what are we seeing? Well, for the third of the last 4 months, durable goods orders fell and missed expectations. Now, they were expecting a 0.2% rise. It fell by 1.4%. New orders fell for computer products, fabricated metals, machinery, transportation, motor vehicle, and a dramatic plunge in non-defense aircraft new orders, and even larger 33.1% collapse in defense aircraft orders. What does this tell us? It tells us that no one is purchasing. No one's purchasing. The factories don't have to produce. The factories don't have to produce. They don't need the raw material. You don't need the raw material. The Baltic Dry Index stays very, very low. And this is what we are seeing right at this point. And the reason why people aren't going out and purchasing is because they cannot find jobs. They are losing jobs. And if they do find a job, they have 1 or 2 part-time jobs. They don't have the disposable income. I mean, look at Chevron. 4,000 employees. Looks like they might be getting cut. Worthington Industries, 550 people. Wells Fargo to cut 1,000 jobs. Shut Milwaukee Home Lending office. Now, again, if the economy is improving and things are getting better and the unemployment rate is continually dropping, why are we seeing all these companies continually laying off thousands of people? It makes no sense. And of course, if we look and we believe the U.S. government central bankers, we would believe that everything is okay. But when we look at their statistical numbers and we compare it to what's really going on, we see a completely different story. And this is from John Williams at Channel Stats, which pretty much backs up everything we've been saying. Headline February retail sales fell by 0.8%. Annual retail sales growth at recession levels. First quarter real estate contraction at 2.6%. Worst showing since depths of economic collapse. Real earnings were down for the month. February year-to-year inflation, negative 0.6%, 7.6%. Unstable home sales data, new sales in protracted stagnation, existing sales trending lower. It's everything we've been talking about, and we can see that all of these economic indicators are showing that we are headed for a major, major collapse. Even the Fed is out there, the Atlanta Fed, that has this prediction model of how they're going to predict the GDP. And of course we have to remember, they wanted to keep GDP in the green, so what they did is they included research and development, and they went back to 1929 and recalculated GDP all the way up to the present to try to help it out a little bit. And we can see every time GDP isn't doing what they want, they just manipulate the numbers. It doesn't really matter. But right now they're continually revising these numbers. Right now, the Fed now sees only 8.2% GDP growth in the first quarter. And of course, they're going to blame this on the bad weather. And if they can, they will pump it up. They'll manipulate the numbers to try to bring this up. Maybe they'll add in Obamacare like they always do, because they include this in GDP. And we can see that when a society is at its end game here, what do? They try to tax more and more. They don't stop because they need the revenue coming in to sustain the debt. We see it in other countries. We saw it in Greece. We see it in Cyprus. We see it in France, Italy. And here in the United States, we've seen additional taxes. I mean, think about it. You're getting taxed on not signing up for health care. I mean, if they can do that, they could do it. You know, you can be taxed on not signing up for auto insurance. You're taxed for not signing up, with an agency. I mean, they can just continually do this. But what they want to do is they want to place an internet sales tax. So when you go out and you purchase your goods, they want to have an additional tax. Senators are going to introduce amendments to the budget. One of the amendments the U.S. Senator Mike Enzi is planning on introducing is a provision to tax the internet sales. But this could be devastating to the entire retail market. Because as you know, retail sales have been dropping. Even online sales have been dropping. And if you add these taxes, those people that just have the part-time jobs or no jobs, have no disposable income, they're going to even hold back further and say, you know what? We're not going to go out and spend. We saw it in Japan when they added a tax on purchases dropped off. The same thing is going to happen. And of course they're doing this because they need more revenue coming in, because they are spending and borrowing like crazy. The debt is increasing. I mean, look at your own home finances. Can this be sustained in your home? If you were making $50,000 a year and you had about $200,000 worth of credit card debt, and you were bringing in, $3,800 a month, and your debt was $3,800, and your debt continually increases as time goes on because you're taking out more debt, how do you sustain your household? You can't. Yes, you can create more money by borrowing on the credit card or getting another credit card, but your revenue coming in is still the same. Unless you go out and get another job to make up the difference, it's not going to work. And even if you get that part-time job, it's just enough to pay for the interest, and then you have to borrow more to keep your lifestyle and to keep everything going. That's what's happening here in the United States, in the Eurozone. There's really no difference whatsoever. And we see the allies of the United States, they're looking at the situation, and they all realize that this entire private Western central bank economy, it's falling apart. The dollar is dying. This is why we see the military all over the place. The military is so thin right now, the U.S. military. They're trying to maneuver them in all different places. Take some out of over here, put it up in Eastern Europe, take a little bit out of Afghanistan, put it down into the Middle East. We don't have enough to maintain control. Basically, this is what happened to Rome. We see Austria now is going to join up with the China-led infrastructure bank. Pretty soon, all of these countries are going to join up. And of course, the United States is saying, yes, we will help with the banking system. We will cooperate. But you know what this really means. Eventually, what they will do is they will try to infiltrate the Chinese-led infrastructure bank and try to bring it into the IMF, the World Bank. This is why the United States government central bankers decided not to vote and give away their percentage of voting power in the IMF. They promised in 2010 they were going to do this, but they didn't. So the emerging markets, the smaller countries, decided, you know what? With the help of China, we will do this on our own. And this is exactly what they're doing. This is why the whole BRIC system came to be. And the banking system came to be. Russia right now has created their own payment system because they're all trying to separate themselves from the dying dollar. They're all de-dollarizing right now. And we can see from what is going on here, the United States government central bankers, they realize that this collapse is coming. They realize they're not going to be able to stop it. They can delay it. They can try to mask it by blaming it on another country or group, but they can't stop it. And they understand this. And this is why they're continually pushing draconian laws. This is why they're having these Jade Helm drills, because they are getting prepared. This is why they created DHS. It's not because of terrorism. Actually, the governments are the terrorists. They're the ones creating all this to keep you in fear. But we have a little bit of hope here. Representative Mark Pocan and Representative Thomas Massie, they've introduced the Surveillance State Repeal Act that would end the NSA's unconstitutional domestic spying. Now, why do we need this? Again, it feels like we're just placing laws on top of laws. We've already have the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment. You need a warrant to spy on the American people. We don't need additional laws, but they want to put something out there to say, hey, we're going to stop what they're doing. Well, we already have something. If we all just band together and say, no, we don't want this, we don't agree, you need to dismantle right at this point in time. Because you're violating our rights. That's all we need. The Patriot Act contains many provisions that violate the Fourth Amendment and have led to a dramatic expansion of our domestic surveillance state, said Representative Massey. Our founding fathers fought and died to stop the kind of warrantless spying and searches that the Patriot Act and the FISA Amendments Act authorizes. Specifically, here is what this new bill will do. Repeals the Patriot Act, which contains the provision that allows for the bulk collection of metadata from U.S. citizens. Repeals the FISA Amendments Act, which contains provisions allowing for the government to monitor emails. It would extend judges' terms of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court and technical and legal experts to advise on technical issues raised during proceedings. Mandate that the Government Accountability Office regularly monitor such domestic surveillance programs for compliance with the law and issue an annual report. Ban the federal government from mandating that the manufacturer of an electronic device must install spy software. Gives people a proper channel to report illegal activity in their department. Says that no information related to a U.S. person may be acquired without a valid warrant based on probable cause, including under Executive Order 12333. Retains tools that, and that one that says you need a warrant, we already have the Fourth Amendment. Actually, all of this, we already have the Fourth Amendment. Retains tools that are useful to law enforcement, such as not requiring a new warrant if the suspect switches devices in attempt to break surveillance. Protects intelligence collection practices involving foreign targets for the purpose of investigating weapons of mass destruction. And we can see this is what they're putting forth because they're trying to protect the people. But the people already have the protections. The people just have to get together and call the government on each and every one of these. That is it. That's all we have to do. Now, we understand the government is trying to remove weapons from the people. And it turns out that the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation misinterpreted statistics on gun shooting in the country, which, of course, the Obama administration would use later on to gain support for stricter gun control regulations. This is coming from the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, and he's saying that exaggerating the increase in mass shootings in the United States aims to alarm people and increase general panic in the country. In October 2014, Lott released a paper analyzing the September FBI report on the number of active shooter attacks and deaths in the country. In its report, the FBI said that the statistics had increased by an annual rate of some 16% in 2000. In October, Lott said in his publication that the annual growth rate of homicides was in fact significantly lower. According to Lott, if biases and errors were corrected in the FBI report, the data would reveal that the annual growth rate had been cut in half. The Crime Prevention Research Center information showed that the FBI put out incorrect numbers on public shootings in the United States not long before the general elections in November 2014. Lott said that the information published by the FBI was misinterpreted to overstate the incidence and risks of mass shootings in the country to help the Obama administration push gun control. And we can see a lot of these reports are coming out. And we can see the statistics that the president continually rattles off are always wrong. And when we go to the meat of the statistics of what's really going on, we find out that no, things are actually the opposite of what he is saying. Now, why in the world would they want to take the weapons away from the people? Because they realize when this collapse comes, the people with the weapons, they are a threat to their authority. And these are the people they need to be worried about. And we can see when they're doing this Jade Helm training drill in 10 different states, this is what they're actually training for. I mean, it's many different things. They're getting people used to military in civilian areas, getting people used to black helicopters flying over, getting people used to maybe gun shootings and the firing of weapons, just like we saw in Miami, Houston, and other areas where they flew in the cover of night just firing the weapons. People had no idea what was going on. All of this is being done because they realize when this system comes tumbling down, people are going to be freaked out. I mean, look what happened in 2008, where everything started to fall apart. I mean, think about it. If the government didn't bail out all these banks, all these companies, think of how many people would have been unemployed out on the streets. Not just in New York, not just in LA, but all over the country. And this would have spread all over the world. And it would have gotten worse as time went on. And people would have no way to make a living. People would get scared. People then would look for food. And you would see the supermarkets being raided. You would see banks being broken into to try to get their money. Banks then would have to be closed down. And they would be on a holiday where they'd implement capital controls. This is what would have happened back in 2008. I mean, think about it. AIG, Bank of America, all these Goldman Sachs, all of them, Wells Fargo, they would not be able to continue. It would completely fall apart. And this would have spread to smaller companies and other companies. And all of these people would be out of work. Yes, would we be able to rebuild? But it would take time. But in the meantime, 3, 6, 9 months, it would just be havoc everywhere. And they know this, and they know it's coming. They know they put this out for a little while because nothing has improved. What, we have all our manufacturing back? No. Everyone is back to work? No. What has improved here? People have regained their wealth that they lost back into? No. People have purchased their homes that they lost? No. Their credit scores and everything else has improved? No. No. We are worse off today. The debt was reduced? No. It was increased. Almost double the amount. We are worse off today, and when this crash comes, it's going to be horrific. Now, we understand that yesterday President Obama came out and he suspended the troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, which we kind of knew this was going to happen. We were leading up to this all along, and here we are. They're going to keep troops in there. And while this was all happening, we see there was a powerful blast that rocked the central Kabul on today. Security officials have confirmed the explosion, saying at least 6 people have been killed and 31 injured. And you can see that they're building the case right now. They're going to start showing you why U.S. troops need to be added to Afghanistan. They do this. This is a very slow process. It doesn't happen overnight because they have to let people believe that the president was withdrawing troops, and because of what the Afghanistan president said, we need to suspend the troops. And now you will see blasts, you will see the Islamic State more often in Afghanistan, and you will see more and more incidents occur, and the president will say, we cannot leave the area just yet. We need to bring in troops to maintain control in the region. Now, out in Ukraine, we understand that Ukraine, after the coup d'etat from the United States government, central bankers, and Europe, that the entire country is completely collapsing. I mean, Ukrainian Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, he's out there saying that they lost about 25% of its economy because of the war with the southeastern people. And basically, he's saying it's not going to get better anytime soon, which we kind of know. So are the people better off now? or before the coup. And I think what happened here is that the United States government, central bankers, they maneuvered their way into many different countries and had regime change. And the people fought back a little bit, but they were able to hold them back with drones and the forces inside the countries. And the regime change seemed to work pretty darn good for a little while. In Ukraine, it seemed like this was completely unexpected. They didn't expect this to happen, where they were going to capture Kiev, and then all of a sudden the people in Crimea were going to say, you know something, we don't want to be part of this. The people in southeastern Ukraine saying, you know something, we don't want to be a part of this. And all they had left was Kiev and the western portion of Ukraine. And I don't think they planned on this. I think this came out of left field, and they didn't know what to do with this. And at this point in time, the country is suffering, and there's nothing they can do except push war, because there is no manufacturing in the West area. They need the southeastern area. They need Crimea. They need the ports. They need to be on the Black Sea. They need all of this. Just holding Kiev doesn't do anything for them. And we can see that the people of Ukraine, they're not responding as well as they would like. We're starting to see protests now against the Ukrainian government. I mean, there's a crowd of about 400 or so people. They were demonstrating in front of the Ukrainian government building, and they wanted the cabinet of ministers to resign, including Yatsenyuk. The demonstrators are carrying posters, Yatsenyuk is tycoons, creature, and Yatsenyuk is traitor of the revolution of dignity. They know, and they're starting to understand what is going on here. This new government, this puppet government that is controlled by the United States government central bankers, they are not there to help the people. And as every day passes, the situation in Ukraine gets worse and worse. And we can see that it's not helping the situation where they're continually trying to push war on the southeastern people, because a lot of these people have relatives in that section. But we can see the United States doesn't really care about this. We understand that they're sending non-lethal weapons to Ukraine. And it looks like there's about 10 U.S. military Humvees. They have arrived in Ukraine. They're expecting about 230 more. And President Poroshenko greeted the first 10 Humvees. And what he's saying is that all of these Humvees will now be equipped with weapons and sent to the front lines in Donbass. And they're waiting for additional vehicles. And we said this in the past here, that once they get these non-lethal weapons, they purchase their weapons in other areas, or covertly had them brought in by the United States government central bankers, because as we know, the FBI, CIA, the military, U.S. military is in Ukraine. They are planning for a major offensive. And we can see this is exactly what they are doing. And they're stalling. They're not moving forward with the Minsk agreement. Russia is out there saying that Kiev should start a direct dialogue with the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Lugansk people. If they really wanted a political solution, they need to begin the process. But every time they go and they have conversations with Kiev, Poroshenko, they pretty much ignore it. They don't want to have dialogue with the southeastern people. And we can see at this point, they're trying to stay away from having political talks, because once they get into it, it's going to be much harder to say, we need to go to war. It's much easier to stay away from the political dialogue and say, okay, they fired upon us, now we have to go to war. Or they'll use a false flag event and say we have to go to war right now. And we can see the oligarchs in Ukraine are looking at the situation, and we might see some infighting. Right now, Poroshenko signed a decree relieving the governor I'm not even going to try to pronounce that town. It's a very long, difficult word, and I know I'm going to completely mess it up. But he is looking at this and saying, you are relieved from your duties. We're going to place someone else in there. And we might see him do this to many different areas. Because as we know, he needs to maintain control of Ukraine. Because if each small pocket starts to rise up, there could be civil war. And we see the people in Ukraine are starting to worry that they might go ahead and try to oust Yatsenyuk, Poroshenko, and I'm sure they're very nervous about this. And this is why the United States government central bankers are in there helping them with their special police force to help civil disobedience and to control the people, because they know what's eventually going to happen. And this is why they're doing this. The Normandy Four are going to get together. It's not going to actually be Angela Merkel and Hollande and Putin. It's going to be there are other advisors that are going to go to the Normandy Four talk, and they're going to talk about the key problem topics: the pullout of heavy weapons from the line of contact in the conflict zone in eastern Ukraine, and they're going to talk about the political dialogue, the violations of the Minsk Agreement, and again, like I said, Europe, United States, they all have sanctions ready to blame it on Russia and the southeastern people as they violate the Minsk Agreement, if they violate the Minsk Agreement. And if Kiev violates the Minsk Agreement, there is no penalty or punishment whatsoever. So we can see right now that they're going to get together, discuss what's going on, because Kiev is continually adding more and more amendments to the Minsk Agreement, which counters the Minsk Agreement, and it's in violation of the Minsk Agreement. And we can see this is exactly what they're going to be talking about in these meetings. We'll see if they go anywhere, and who knows, fighting might all of a sudden erupt because of some type of false flag event. Now we see Japan is out there, and they just received its biggest flat-top helicopter carrier since World War II. And this is at the same exact time where Prime Minister Abe is attempting to loosen the restraints of Japan's post-war pacifist constitution. Article 9, he would like to change. And we can see they're building and accepting new warships. The Izumo is about 248 meters long, and with a crew of about 470, it resembles the amphibious assault carriers of the U.S. Marine Corps. And we see that they are getting prepared, because eventually they understand that the United States government, the central banking system, is going to start a war one way or another. And I used this example many, many times before, because what they do as a bully and as what they do as provoking another country, you can compare this to someone walking down a hall and they poke you in the chest. You do nothing. You walk away. The next day, it happens the same thing. The person walks down the hall, they poke you in the chest again. Now this happens 3, 4, 5, 6 days in a row. On the 7th day, as that person is walking down the hall, you know he's getting ready to poke you. And instead, you hit him first, or push him against the wall and say, "Stop it." And he screams out and says, "This person's attacking me! This person's attacking me!" And then the teachers run out. They don't understand what's going on. And all they see is this person attacking this other person in the hall, which was provoking the person who attacked. And the teachers take away that person. They bring him to the principal's office. And they say, "Why did you attack?" "Well, because he was poking me." "Well, we didn't see him poke you." "Well, he poked me 6 days in a row as I walked by, and I had enough." Did you poke? And they ask the other kid, Did you poke him?" "No, I didn't. He just attacked me out of nowhere." This is how provoking works. And we can see the United States government central bankers, this is what they are doing to all these countries. And if they aren't provoked to do something, they will help them along by doing it for them and then blaming it on them. Now, out in the Middle East, we understand that all the countries, Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, the people in each one of these countries, they're sick and tired of the United States government central bankers. They're sick and tired of having a puppet government, and they are taking action. And we can see that over time, Yemen, Libya, They've been pushing out the puppet governments, pushing. And we can see right now Saudi Arabia is getting ready to do something. They're deploying a significant task force to the border with Yemen. President Hadi has been asking the UN to approve the use of foreign forces in Yemen. A U.S. source that described the concentration of Saudi troops as significant made a guess that Saudi Arabia might be getting ready to strike if the Yemen people attempt to seize the residence of Yemen's legitimate president. Well, Yemen's president, he has fled the country by sea because what was going on there, and it looks as though the people of Yemen have taken control of Yemen. And we can see that the United States government central bankers, they don't want this. So we see Saudi Arabia right on the border with their troops, ready to go ahead and do something. So we have problems now. We have Yemen, the government has fallen. We have Libya, the government has fallen. We have fighting going on in Lebanon. The U.S. is supplying them with more weapons because it's getting worse and worse. Now, if Lebanon falls, the United States government central bankers have a major problem because it's starting to spread further and further, getting closer to Iraq. And they're trying to maintain the status quo in Iraq at this point. And they're using the Islamic State to create chaos in each one of these countries. And as long as the Islamic State is in each one of these countries, they can use the authorization for war to go into these countries. But then again, it's just hanging out in the Congress. So we can see that they are going to build up and create some type of special event to help the authorization for war forward, to get passed, so they can bring the troops in and they can bring back the puppet governments and maintain order in these countries. Because right now they've lost control. We see that the Islamic State is taking responsibility for the bombing inside Benghazi at an army checkpoint. And we're starting to see that the Islamic State is taking responsibility for pretty much everything at this point. Even if they're not involved, they're going to take responsibility because they want everyone to believe that the Islamic State is everywhere. Because in this authorization for war, wherever the Islamic State is, that's where the United States government central bankers can go. Now we see that a Germanwings 4U9525 crashed. And what was very interesting about this crash, and there's an investigation still going on, is that as soon as the crash happened, the U.S. was out there and they ruled out terrorism. From all our research and our investigation, we rule out terrorism. Well, how did they know? It just happened. They don't even have the black boxes. They haven't even collected all the pieces, but they're already out there trying to make everyone believe that it had nothing to do with terrorism. Which makes me think it might have had something to do with the U.S. government, central bankers. Because they're trying to say, no, this was natural. The plane just went down. But we will see what happens. Right now, the rescuers in the coming days will be recovering about 150 bodies of the passengers killed on the plane. After the bodies have been discovered, investigators will seal the site to protect the scene so that every piece of debris from the crashed aircraft can be marked and run into a 3D composite image. And the authorities are saying, well, terrorism cannot be ruled out. Do I think it's the Islamic State? If it was anyone, it must have been CIA, Mossad, or another type of agency that brought the plane down. But we will see what actually happens as time goes on. Now, the Islamic State is out there, and an expert on chemical warfare has said the Islamic State terrorists who are coming back to the UK could carry out a chlorine gas attack in London Underground, in trains or at football matches. It is very evident that the Islamic State are putting much time and effort into training its jihadists in the use of chlorine. Well, we know they are because they're using it in Syria, and of course they're trying to blame Assad for this, but really it's the proxy army of the Islamic State. And I wouldn't be surprised if they attached a chlorine weapon to an IED and exploded it in London, in New York. Because as we know, the Islamic State seized a large chlorine factory in Mosul, and we understand that New York ran chemical gas drills in the subway system. I think this was last year. What were they preparing for? And again, they're going to need to do something to push the authorization for war. Now, will it happen here in the United States? It might happen in London. It might happen someplace else in Europe. It might happen in the United States. But we can be assured that they will do something to push that authorization for war through and get it voted on. Because they need to go into all of these countries. Now, what's very interesting is that the Islamic State released a kill list. And the list really doesn't make that much sense. I mean, they have many different states and towns inside the states, like Texas, San Antonio, Weil, Fort Hood, Bedford, Killeen, Indiana, Michigan City, Michigan, Dearborn Heights, Lake Orion. Dearborn Heights is outside of Detroit. Connecticut, Barkham, Hampstead. Manchester, Nevada is Reno. Georgia is Griffin. Maryland is Upper Marlboro. Warrensburg, Lexington Park. Arizona is Phoenix. And it goes on and on and on. But what's very interesting is that, of course, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Why are they picking major cities and then small little towns? Are they going to show that the Islamic State or the insiders, the CIA, Mossad, MI6 operatives inside the United States who are planning this false flag event, they will hit big cities, little towns to make it look like it's all over the place no matter where you are? That's one alternative. But what's very interesting about all of this is that in Michigan, in the town of Dearborn Heights, which is right outside of Detroit, not that far from it, there was a spotting of a flag of the Islamic State. And it was spotted on the side of a truck near a United States Army Reserve Center in Southfield. And of course they're out there saying, no, this was part of a training exercise, and for some reason the truck was driven off the base and brought into town and people spotted it. Now, is this something that they're planning for? Where they might be having some type of drill and they'll be having these trucks or cars with the Islamic State flag, and then all of a sudden something does happen. We saw this in the Boston bombing where there was a drill going on. There was a drill going on with 9/11. And this just has to make you think, what exactly is going on here? And we know, eventually, when all else fails, they will use an event to push the agenda to where they want it to go. And if they can't maintain the illusion that the economy is getting better, they will do it before the economy falls, because they need to blame this on another country or group. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.